Hi, so understanding the language of the horse. This was a pilot study that I did, creating an ethogram of the horse's ear movements. Basically, part one was to identify the at-rest ear position, because it was understood that the horse's ears were similarly continually moving and there was never a consistent at-rest ear position. So introduction and background. So basically, I'll let you read this yourself anyway, but looking at all of the different things of going into language communication in research into horses, a lot of it's connected with pain and how is the horse is responding to pain. Are they communicating back to us about pain? The answer is yes, but how they were measuring it was a little bit, what can I say? I would say unethical in the terms of doing it. So submitting pain to the horses to see what the reactions were. However, they were looking for facial expressions as opposed to what the animals were actually communicating. And if we look at the facial expressions but exclude the ear positions, then we actually lose a lot of the communication that the animals are talking about. Now, I became a horse whisperer with some of the training that I did with Monty Roberts in California. So I became an ambassador for his Equus Online University. I did over 450 online lessons with Monty, and also went on tour with Monty when he came to the UK as well, helping support and promote his methods of trying to understand the horse better and gentle trainings. Although I don't necessarily agree with the head collar, the pressure that it applies to a horse, I can understand the principles of using it with horses that are out of control and gaining control as horses are obviously stronger than us. So based on the information that I went through, so the aim of my pilot study at university was to clarify what I'd actually been learning as a horse whisperer. And it was basically understanding all of the ear actions and how the movements were, and connecting as well with the facial expressions. But also as well, something else was the fact that the speed of how horses communicate, which as detailed in my book, is a lot faster than we could possibly ever imagined. There was one incident in the book where my daughter accidentally caught one of the horses in the face with the lunge whip after exercise, and he just shook his head and seemingly went off. But it wasn't until I slowed down to actually see what was going on in the video footage that I caught of the incident that I captured 13 facial expressions to a fraction of one of my daughter's surprised look. So the speed and all of everything that the horses have got is absolutely enormous, and we just cannot visibly see it necessarily with the visual eye. However, there are things that we can do to actually define certain actions that the horses do with their ears that are actually communicating to us as well, which I'm sure as a horse person you already know this. So that's just a bit of the details there. So the way that I actually did the dissertation was based on the horses at rest, and it was looking for what was actually going on whilst the horses were at rest. And I found connecting factors through every single action that the horses did. So I recorded for 12 minutes, but I slowed that down into seconds in order to dissect and see what was going on. I did, as it said there, over a 2-week period, I did 168 minutes of recording of the horses in different scenarios and sessions, but it was way too much data, so I had to only choose the 12 minutes at rest. Okay. I applied the principles of the ears, similar to what the Semaphore Flags for on the mountain, so that where the horse's ears move backwards, forwards, they rotate, different angles, etc. And this was what I started to use in order to create the methods of how we can calculate what the horses are communicating with their ears. Now, when you see the horses in the stables and they'll be talking to each other, I've got Pussycat here as well, sorry, she's on my lap, then we can see that their ears are always action and moving, and then there's other things that are going on between them as well. Lip speech is another thing that I defined within the study as well, and how horses are actually doing a lip speech that defines very similar to us. So you can see my mouth moving, the horses do exactly the same thing, which again is detailed in my book. So lip speech is something I've created as to how horses are communicating. But it's not unless we actually know what is going on and defining a baseline that we can move it forwards, which is why I created the Equine Semaphore Code, so we can have a baseline in order to figure out what the horses are saying with their ears. Now, it was all based on angles from a lateral and a frontal view. You can also take it from a caudal view as well, so we can gauge the angles of where the horses are and at which rotation as well, because obviously if they're at a 90-degree angle, we've got a forward, a lateral or a caudal view of the ears, so that they can hold it in that position and rotate it. I also had to define as well what was a rotation and what was a flick, because both of these have a different meaning on how the horse is actually using their ears in order to get to the different positions of communication. Then taking it from the marker points, so I actually created 4 marker points. The reason for 4 marker points was so that this could actually also equate for the, I can't pronounce the name, the horses with the ears that turn inwards at the top of the apex. So there's 2 types of breed of those. So with the markers number 2 on this here, then that is something that can be applied to the other horses as well. I have dyslexia and I can't always get my words out, which is one of my issues why I've never been forwards in doing things like this before. So just so you're aware that I do struggle with my words to get them out sometimes. Now, what I did as well, we had to take into account the head neck position of the horses, and the current head neck position found in previous studies actually used 3 different measurement marking things which are completely inconsistent with each other. So you can't use the neck of a horse, which is defined in the normal head neck position, because obviously if you've got a crest of neck, then the angle of what you actually have in that is going to change. So I actually found that the eye is actually the most consistent angle that we could actually use in defining the head neck position. So based on head neck position 1, based in one of the studies, or in 2 of the studies actually, if the horse is in that neutral position, head neck position 1, then the angle of the eye to the bone that's at the front of the eye, which is the vertical line, roughly, is a 90-degree angle. So if the horse's head is in that head neck position 1, then there's our 90-degree angle. And then depending on where the horse is holding its head, either it's lifting up or putting it down, gives us either a positive or a negative angle, which is really good as well for assessing roll cur and benefits or lack of benefits roll cur has actually on the horse. So where a horse might have Roman nose, people might think they're on the vertical or just behind the vertical, but in fact they're not, because the horse has got a Roman nose and they're bringing the Roman nose further, which is then obviously damaging their neck and their poll area. The results were very consistent the whole way through. So it actually defined, I've got here that identified 245 ear changes, but also in 43 groups of movements. Now what I mean by this is over those time periods, I defined a 3-second gap minimum between the actions of the horse. So every action was actually tracked, so from the ear movement, body changes, if a foot moved, if an eye blinked, if a mouth movement happened, absolutely everything was documented. And then that's then broke that down into what I call conversations. So you could actually define where horses were having group conversations with each other, and I noted 43 conversations within 12 minutes. So this was just the breakdown here, so the ethogram and the documentation, and you can see where the blue lines are, that's where the conversations were between the horses. Where there was only pink, then this is where the horses were completely motionless and there was no actions at all, no foot movement, no ear movements, but all the ear movements were still seemingly in different positions. They weren't in what was typically known as the at-rest position. So this is the herd that we actually used. So apart from the large grey there, sadly he died by the time I did the study, but these were the guys, and we were building it as a sanctuary at the time, but circumstances have changed and we've had to go away from that. We're now selling the horses, but we're coming down to just 3 horses, which is the 2 chestnuts and the grey on the right side. The 2 chestnuts are still considered dangerous around people if they're put into a position where they don't have a choice. They were both hurt somehow. We won't know whether one was quite severely beaten in a stable. He was very dangerous when we took him on, but he's absolutely beautiful with us, but he's not with the vet, and he becomes very dangerous around a vet. So they are 2 horses that we've got there that could never be rehomed, that have to be put down for risk of human injury. Okay, so conclusion was that basically I did a baseline measurement using the markers that I did, and that we can actually document and calculate what animals are communicating, or the horses. It's got to be done on slow motion as well, but it needs to be done not just on visual. It could go completely digital on this, so we could have markers on the horse's ears and we could do the computerized, and it's going to be fascinating what it actually picks up. Now, what I found as well is, which is detailed in my book, if a horse's ear goes forward and back and forwards, then that means something, and it depends on which ear is actually moving as to what it actually says. Now, this was something I picked up with Monty Roberts' training. He said he always understood that the horse knew what it had to do because of something it did with its left ear, and he just said that its left ear moves forward. Now, this is incorrect when you really monitor it, so I really studied Monty's research and everything that he did in all of his videos. There's it's a 3 action, so it's an ear flicking forwards and flicking back. That actually is the action that Monty sees. Quite detailed, and that means I understand on the left ear. Now, opposites, if we have something that says I understand, then the opposite side would be that the right ear doing exactly the same action would mean that I don't understand. So looking into the research again and looking at videos, I've watched so much documentations on videos, then that also conforms to the fact that if a horse's right ear does this flick motion, then they're saying that I don't understand. Lots more involved, okay, but the Equine Semaphore Code could be the baseline that's needed in order to calculate what animals are actually communicating. Now, I say animals because anything with an upright pinner, then the Equine Semaphore Code can be applied to. Now, this particular picture here was taken at one of the zoos near me, and I started to communicate with that giraffe that's looking at me, and in the animal coding system that I've learnt, and his first reaction was okay, and the second reaction was I want to know more, and he became completely fixed. So I had like the camera to the side of me and I was just taking loads and loads of photos. I just had it on complete sort of like take as many as possible, and he completely came fixed on me. I saw all of the ear actions exactly the same as I saw with the horse, be it that their ears are in a slightly different position. So the Equine Semaphore Code can be applied to any animal with the upright pinner. It just needs the marker points. So I think there's a fantastic opportunity here for an expansion of the animal communication system. Facial expressions as well. I actually love this one. So you've got here, he's looking at me this way coming forwards, but then you've got this is his wife just here at the background, and this is their baby. And the wife's expression is, "What are you doing, dear?" And if you notice, her ear positions are slightly different, as well as her facial expression. He's quite intent and focused on me whilst he was communicating with me. And then you've got the baby there. Ear positions are in the I am staying still, which is what a lot of the back ear position is. But the back ear position can take several different angles, which means a different thing at every particular angle it's actually done at. So there's lots and lots there. But that is part of the Equine Semaphore Code, and that's what I started doing. Where it will go, I have no idea. But if you're into horses and you want to see them make a difference, then I'd love to hear from you and see if it's something that you can use within your own research.